And welcome everybody. It is 12 Eastern Standard Time and 9 o'clock if you are listening from Vancouver, BC. Jules say Vancouver. There's other things in that zone. I hope you can all hear me, and welcome so much to our 2018 SDG survey. This is very exciting. This is, as you might know, the third survey. So Jules has just put a slide up here. I guess I should not speak so much to it, because if you cannot hear me, it does not make any sense. But we have had from time to time that people can't hear, so therefore I hope that those that can't hear me can read this. The other thing, while people look at that, for those of you who are not muted yourself, that would be great if you can mute yourself, and then we will open up the lines for questions later. Yes, Jules is looking as that is what's going to happen. Okay, so what we want to do today is that I'll start by I should tell you we have 301 plus registered, so I know that not all of you might know as much about the UN Global Compact and the Global Compact Network Canada as I would want you to. So therefore, I'll just going to give you a few words about the Global Compact Network Canada, who we are and what we do. So we are all about engaging locally for global change. We are the Canadian network of the UN, the United Nations Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, and our mission is based on two pillars, basically. First, we are spearheading the Sustainable Development Goals and the 10 principles: human rights, labor rights, environment, and anti-corruption. So those 10 principles are the principles of the United Nations Global Compact. In doing so, we host a lot of events and initiatives throughout the year based on the Sustainable Development Goals and these 10 principles. These include our SDG Awards, our Gender Equality Forum, the National Roundtable on the SDGs, just to name a few. And you can see a lot of, hopefully some of you will recognize yourself also from the stock exchange, etc. Secondly, we strive to unify and build the capacity of the Canadian private and public sector to embrace sustainable business practices. And we do that by convening and accelerating opportunities for multi-stakeholder collaboration and learning. So a few of our programs that do this include the SDG reporting training, the anti-corruption training and certificates, and we also engage heavily with the Canadian federal government, as you will also hear from today, and offer our network supporters opportunities to meet with select ministries, but also ministers. To learn more about our program and our events, I urge you to follow us on social media and join our mailing list to stay up to date. And I think on all the slides there should also be the social media hashtags: SDG Survey 2018, hashtag SDGs for Canada, and the Global Compact CA is the hashtag. That's what I call it. No, the at Global Compact CA for our Twitter account. I should say we're turning 5 this year, so we have come a long way thanks to all of you participants, and therefore I'll just wanted to share the logos of all of our supporters and signatories. And if you don't see your logo for your company or university or not-for-profit, I urge you to get in contact and learn how you can actually be part of this this growing and amazing network. So first we have here our visionary supporters, then we have the patron supporters, then we have the supporters, and finally, well, I guess more, we have the Canadian signatory and participants also of the United Nations Global Compact. So that was very short. You can always return to the recording of this and find your logo. But Also, when we're talking about Sustainable Development Goals and the Global Compact Network Canada, we have since 2015, and actually a little bit before, been actively promoting the Sustainable Development Goals to mobilize the Canadian private sector to advance the action towards the global goals. And this includes everything from our SDG reporting training, which is an interactive training program for sustainability professionals to learn how to report on the SDGs. The participants that participate so far have received advice from sustainability reporting experts such as GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, SASB, so Sustainability Accounting Standard Boards, IIRC, the International Integrated Reporting Council, and we will be hosting another training on September 6th, so please do let us know if you're interested. The other thing that will come up is the SDG Awards. We started the SDG Awards back in 2016 when the Sustainable Development Goals came into force, and we have been hosting the awards ever since. Now we have just sent out news about the 2018 awards, and if you haven't received the news about that, please check it out on our website and send in your application and start to let the world know what you're doing so we can get the knowledge out there. We also have the SDG Working Group, which is a platform for multi-stakeholder collaboration and peer-to-peer learning. One great example of this in action is our SDG Working Group, where we have a group of companies coming together to discuss opportunities and challenges around the SDGs. What has worked for them? What is not working? How can we share the best practices? How can we come together to actually collaborate on a project with other companies or PPP, public-private partnerships? And last but not least, what you're actually here for, that is the SDG survey that I'll be sharing with you today. So, well, okay, one more thing. Just that we are going to celebrate our 50th anniversary, but also have the SDG, Canadian SDG Business Forum 2018. That is going to take place in Toronto on September 7th. And we will be giving the awards away actually in the evening of September 6th. So put it in your calendar. Now to the survey. So, the last 3 years, we have conducted the SDG survey to better understand how Canadian stakeholders from the private sector, civil society, and others perceive the SDGs and how we could inspire to increase levels of participation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The survey has generated a large number of insightful responses over the years, which have helped to paint a picture of the actions that Canadian businesses and not-for-profit community and others are taking and planning to take to advance Sustainable Development Goals. So since our first survey in 2015, we are seeing an increase, not surprisingly, in the number of survey respondents each year. The first year we had 50 responses, then it grew to 134, now to 419. So those numbers might not sound that impressive, but it is a 740% increase, and I'm hoping to see more and more because we are seeing a rapidly growing interest and familiarity with the SDGs over the years, which will hopefully, what that's all about, translate into greater action. So before I just get to introduce my fantastic panel, I also just want to say that this year we had support from Global Affairs Canada and for this survey. So thank you very much for that to Global Affairs Canada and to Deirdre Kent, that is part of the impressive panel that will be commenting on the results today. And of course, all of you will also be able to ask questions. So, Deirdre, I know you're on. We have a short little bio here from you, but do you just want to say hi in a few words?
Thank you very much, Helle. Well, congratulations first to you and Global Compact Network for your third year of the survey, and clearly it's resonating. So we're really pleased to have been able to support the survey and this important contribution with your membership. So thanks very much. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. And next we have Dorst from Tahoe. Dorst, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As you'll see, I've been with Tahoe Resources for a year and a half, and I'm excited to speak to Tahoe's work in relation to the SDGs, and in particular to use that as perhaps a discussion point on how it benchmarks against the the Canadian view of SDG priorities in Canada and abroad. So congratulations on the growth and participation of this important piece of work. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Doris. And last but definitely not least, Natalie Trudeau, from the Director of the Environment and Climate Change Canada. Natalie, just want to check, I also have you on the line.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me to your webinar today. We've looked at your results very carefully, and we've been very interested with what we are seeing. We think it's a very good piece of work, and we're looking forward to see the results in detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And can I ask all my panelists to mute themselves? There was just a little bit of noise on, or maybe Jules, I can see Jules muting you. So here we go. Then let me just give you the highlight of the survey, and then we go into comments from the panel. Then we go into more detailed questions about then what, and again have comments, but hopefully also questions from all of you. You can raise your hand, I think it is, and you can write in questions. But let me just give you the highlights of the survey results. So in order to better track the changing priorities in the Sustainable Development Goals year over year, we have continued to keep the core survey questions the same. You see them here on the screen. And while you read them, I'll just tell you a little bit about the methodology. So in order to figure out how do we capture the SDG preferences, we used a weighted scoring system that giving more mass to rank 1 vote and less to rank 5 votes. So if you answered the survey and you said SDG number 1 was first priority, we would multiply that by 5, and your second choice we will multiply by 4, etc., etc. So that's just to give you the heads up in terms of the survey, and you can of course download the survey and get all of this information as well. Then I would also just want to show you a quick overview of the results from 2016 and 2017, just so you can see how that have changed from year to year. So here you have 2016. Looked after gender equality in this one, SDG number 5. If anybody can find it, let me know. Then let's go to 2017, and here you'll see that gender equality suddenly appeared, as well as climate change or climate action also got as becoming first of the priorities. But keep these in mind. I'm going to put them in front of me as well. And let's then look at the 2018 survey. So this is where we asked what about the priorities for Canada? And for 2018, you see that climate action is the top spot once again. That was the same as last year, followed by sustainable cities, responsible consumption, gender equality, and that was actually the first time gender equality is shown in the priorities for Canada, and economic growth. The SDG that's new to this list is, as I said, gender equality. And of course, it's interesting to see that that SDG listed here, especially with our gender equality leadership in the Canadian private sector project that we started this year at the Global Compact together with Canadian companies. That's actually supported and funded by the Ministry of Status of Women. So we're glad to see that gender equality is a top 5 list here, together with all the others. So this is the priorities for Canada. If we then go to what are the priorities for the world, where we ask Canadians to say what are their list in terms of the world, we see climate action ranked here as well, probably reflecting the Paris Agreement as a high priority for the world, as well as it was for Canada. No poverty have become the #1 ranked priority for the world, while it was #2 last year. Respondents also linked poverty to security issues. Ensuring an economically stable population supports the security of a country and a region. So along with SDG #1, hunger and malnutrition, that was hard, is something that seems to be systemic and widespread in the developing world, but is also measurable and is a basic human right that is essential to be met. Good health and well-being is at the top of the list, as some respondents believe that the goal of the Sustainable Development Goals is to improve quality of life, health, and well-being of all humans. Some would add to that not only all humans, but all living. But let's keep to what we hear in the survey. Quality education is indeed one of the most important foundations for human development. Hence, we also see that as the top priority for the world. Now, so this was more for the world and for Canada. If we then ask the respondents, please rank the top 5 SDGs that the current focus on your business or your organization. Here you see the priorities for the organizations, and not surprisingly, perhaps priorities within organizations seems to particularly focus on the Sustainable Development Goals that directly impacts economic growth, their workforce, as well as the growth and sustainability of the organization as a whole. Last year, the #1 was gender equality, then it was quality education, then good health and well-being, etc. So we'll see a little bit of changing, but it seems somehow to be the same SDGs we also had in SDG #9, 13, and 8 last year. When we then go to the issues that the respondents believe that their companies, organizations should focus on, the list looks like this, and that is not that different again from also last year, where we had SDG 5, 13, 8, 3, 4, 12, and 9, and I should say last year we actually, some of them had 6 priorities. So again, it's not that much of a difference, but a little bit of reshuffling. There is clearly a recognition that there is something to be done here, and there's additional priorities that respondents believe can contribute towards the greater success of their organizations while meeting those higher societal expectations. So, I guess there you have it. These are the preliminary findings from the SDG survey 2018. Well, these are the findings in terms of the results, and then we have a lot of more in-depth. But I think I'll stop a little bit here and then turn it to our panel to give their reactions, their insight into all of these priorities. So with that, I'm going, Jules will be making sure that Deidre, you can speak. You should be on now, and let us know if you want us to change any slides.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks very much for the overview. I think that you know, the analysis coming from the survey is really interesting to see the trends. I mean, from our perspective, I can only underline the important role the private sector has to play in implementing all of the SDGs in Canada and abroad. So we do appreciate the chance to work closely with the Global Compact network, and really heartened to see the many companies and organizations taking action to advance the SDGs as evidenced in the survey. I'd say it's also encouraging to see the desire from survey respondents to engage in partnerships with government, nonprofits, industry. This type of collaboration is going to be critical to achieving the SDGs. So in terms of the priorities, there's been a large amount of consistency over the last 3 years. Gender equality, number 5, figures top 5 for Canada for the first time this year. So this is really positive in terms of a recognition or rising awareness of the importance of gender equality as a public policy issue. I mean, for the Government of Canada and clearly for the survey respondents. So, but for the Government of Canada, we are active across all 17 goals, and our priorities do align closely with the priorities you've identified for Canada going forward. Perhaps I could just highlight for the participants today that on April 17th, the government announced it was developing a national strategy for the SDGs in collaboration with Canadian stakeholders. So this will set out a whole of Canada, whole of society plan for Canada's implementation over for the 2030 agenda. So you'll see us over the coming months reaching out to Canadians, obviously the private sector, but also Indigenous peoples, civil society, different levels of government to develop this national strategy and work with partners to build public awareness and ownership of the goals and to build new partnerships. So this builds on the federal budget, which was released in February, which we're saying was our first 2030 budget. It showed for the first time how Government of Canada policies support the 2030 agenda and how budget initiatives support SDG progress. It also announced financial support for an SDG unit to fund monitoring and reporting activities by Stats Canada and to support programming over the remaining 13 years of the agenda. So you'll be seeing even better coordination across levels of government, civil society, private sector for the 2030 agenda. And of course, being at Global Affairs Canada, we're focused on the international implementation. So the budget also provided an additional $2 billion over 5 years for international assistance that's going to be, you know, have the impact internationally. So there's the slide there. So I'll stop there and pass it over to the other panelists. Thanks.
Thanks, Deirdre. I wasn't sure if you wanted to have the slides here or not. So you had this slide, and then you actually have another one. And again, we will share all of this this afterwards. Jules, can you help me get this? Oh, there we go. And then Dorst, if we can get you on muted. And thanks, Deirdre. Really appreciate that. A lot of good things happening. Okay.
Hi.
Yes,
can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're on.
Fantastic. Thanks so much again. Just wanted to give a kind of Canadian private sector take on the SDGs. So if you could go to the next slide, which just gives a quick overview of our company. You know, we're a mining and minerals Canadian company, and I want to draw your attention to start to our mission statement because I think it sets the tone for our approach to the SDGs. You know, company, we know that our success depends on people various stakeholders investing in us, key stakeholders, whether that be shareholder investment or our employees being committed to our success or our local communities wanting to see us succeed, which is often referred to the social license to operate. That is having all three of those what is going to lead to successful operations. And we know that for these stakeholders to invest in us, they also must feel that they're also receiving value from our work. So whether it's returning value and development to the local communities and host countries where we work, or equipping our workforce with well-paying jobs, ensuring that they return home safely each night, and also increasing their skill set and competitiveness in the market, or even if it's within larger society, feeling that we're creating value through a commodity needed for modern functions, also safeguarding the physical and social environment where we work. That is what drives us. And quite frankly, it's a shift in thinking for the mining industry, just to see a shift in SDG priorities over the past 3 years. So it is certainly a learning process for us. And you'll see as I speak in the next slides about our SDG goals, there's a shift of growing importance on SDGs such as gender equality and climate change. The other piece here is, as you'll see in the map, our reality is that we work and operate throughout the Americas. So we have to take into account the operational realities and differences across places in like Ontario, alongside Guatemala, Peru, and the US. And as we're a young company, we have years of mining experience, but still quite young in terms of social management and integration of key social considerations into all aspects of our business. In terms of our journey with the SDGs, I'd say we've worked on SDG-related issues from the very beginning of operations, but I would also say that well, I'm sure you all can relate that it's not until you necessarily have an intended to-dos that move slowly until you have a design and or a committed activity related to it. And in fact, we've recently joined the Global Compact and the Network Canada, and that has given us a mandate as well as the space for my office to work on mapping and aligning to the SDGs. And we still have a lot of mapping to do, but I look forward to working with the SDGs more closely and leveraging them as a way to push our own strategy and corporate vision for social investment as well as good practice, good business practice across the company. But as I said, as you'll see in the next couple of slides, we've already advanced quite a bit of SDG-focused work within our company, not necessarily because it was due to a commitment to the SDGs, rather because it is the right thing to do for our company. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thanks. And as such, there's relevant SDGs that we actively work on as part of our social management and our sustainability portion of our work. As a company, our social investment objectives are centered on who we are as an organization. We're the private sector, we're a natural resource company, and we have a highly skilled workforce in the Americas. So our focus is on education, economic development, and natural resource management. And as I mentioned, we operate in places like rural communities in Latin America as well as an Ontario community with a long history of mining. So in a lot of ways, we've had to mesh within our own strategy both the needs of Canada as well as the global needs. I will preface the following. I'm going to give an overview of our focus areas, but I'll preface that with one clear statement. As a company, and particularly as a mining company, we understand that the underlying foundation of any of our SDG-related work has to be fundamental principles of good business practice. And that's fundamental principles of respect, fairness, accountability, and transparency when working with our local stakeholders. And only in achieving, maintaining, and improving our good working relationships with our local communities can we even hope to accomplish any of these long-term development goals. But you'll see that we do focus in education in many shapes and forms. We've seen also that particularly maternal education is a direct contributor to increased health outcomes of local families. And so particularly in places like Guatemala, where malnutrition is incredibly high, the highest in Latin America, our education work also centers around programs such as Healthy Homes that include that combine health, education, nutrition, as well as small business skills for mothers to be able to develop to advance the well-being of their families. Education, of course, also includes training and skills development of our workforce and the community to be able to seek other work opportunities. And cultural heritage is part of that, because we also see an educational need, a piece around safeguarding cultural heritage of our local communities, and particularly the indigenous communities in the regions where we work. Then another key piece as a private sector company is economic development. Then that's both skills related to the building skills related to the mining industry. In Peru, we sponsor heavy equipment training programs that are aimed at local community participation. And in Canada, we co-sponsor mining essentials programs to introduce First Nations women to the mining industry. But we also help to build the skills related to small business development within local communities, so that they can then advance their own companies and products in the region. And then finally, natural resource management, which focuses both on water and watershed management, reforestation, participatory monitoring, and the such. And a key piece here is that you'll see at the center of our work with communities is the institutionality piece. We have a community development team that is dedicated solely to working hand in hand with municipal development organizations to strengthen their own abilities in their municipal and regional development planning, their assessment process, project management, and instituting transparency and accountability. So that as a key driver, we see that as a key driver and a fundamental driver of development within the region, and fundamental to achieving the three kind of arms of our investment strategy. I put reduced inequalities and sustainable communities off to the side, not because they're less important, but because we see that our fundamental social investment strategy the aim is to lead to the outcomes of reducing inequality in the regions where we work and building the sustainability of the communities where we're operating. And if you could advance to the next slide, please. And finally, the previous slide was a focus on our social investment strategy, but we also see that, there's sustainability material issues across our business. And interestingly enough, while material issues for the mining sector are considered unique, what I see is that with the survey results, there's a lot of similarities to what companies are, from the results, what companies are or think they should be working towards. Our goals really, as operating in Canada and Latin America, are the same good practice everywhere, no matter which jurisdiction we are in. So, of course, it's issues that are relevant to our workforce, as well as a natural resource company, other subset issues related to safeguarding the long-term stability of the environment. So in this particular slide, you'll see there's several SDGs that are of smaller icons, 15, 17, and 9. These are areas which I believe we have already worked with some success and have a solid program already in place. The larger icons, 3, 5, 8, 12, and 13 are areas that as a company, we're constantly focused on improving, or in the case of climate action, really starting in earnest a program of measurement and target setting for reduction of non-renewable energy consumption and scope 1 emissions. But in general, the safety, well-being, and fair labor practices for our workforce are always critical aspects of the success of our business. SDG number 5, gender equality. We have a new diversity policy in place for over a year, and our implementation is focused on increasing diverse hiring pool, fostering development of our existing diverse workforce, and building, diverse workforce in the mining industry of the future. And then number 12, always, focused on managing and mitigating negative environmental and social impacts of our production and consumption patterns. So, I see all of these kind of addressing the kind of structural inequalities that still exist and are important for, as the private sector, to focus in on good business practice as a way to drive longer-term development outcomes for society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doris. Really interesting. And yes, as you're saying, they no surprise, but that what you're working on is probably what a lot of companies are also working on. And we'll see a little bit later the rest of the results that we still have some ways to go from the mapping to the reporting, etc. But now, before we get to that, Natalie, I think you're on now?
Yes, thank you very much. You can hear me?
I can hear you indeed, yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. First of all, maybe to give you a little bit of background about our directorate at Environment and Climate Change Canada. The Sustainability Directorate is responsible for the development of the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy. So our strategy has 13 aspirational goals, and they are pretty much our reflection of the environmental SDGs. And we're also responsible for reporting and planning the strategy and reporting against it. And we are developing and updating the Canadian Environmental Sustainability Indicators, which provides the data required to report against our process and on other key environmental sustainability issues. So next slide, please. As Deirdre already mentioned, the results of the SDG survey are very timely given the recent announcements concerning Canada's domestic approach to implementing the SDGs through, for example, Budget 2018 and the launch of the National Voluntary Report that we will present at the high-level political forum next July. So from the perspective of Environment and Climate Change Canada, it's particularly interesting to see that in your results, the SDG 13, climate action, continues to be the top priority domestically, and it's also the only SDG that ranks in the top 5 in all 4 categories. So as you mentioned in your report, this could very well be because both the challenges and the opportunities that climate change presents, as well as the interconnectedness that we see with climate change and the other goals of the SDGs. So from the government, the federal government's perspective, Canada is really committed to being a leader in advancing action on climate change and clean growth, both at home and abroad. So we're investing in climate-smart policies and initiatives. Some of our specific initiatives include the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, which is the first climate change plan in Canada's history to include collective and individual commitments by federal, provincial, and territorial governments. We also have the Low Carbon Economy Fund and the Investing in Canada plan, which support projects aimed at reducing the greenhouse gas emissions and ensuring our clean growth. We have the Canada's Climate Change Adaptation Platform, bringing together different key groups in Canada to collaborate on climate change adaptation priorities. And our Canadian Federal Sustainable Development Strategy. As I mentioned, the strategy is our Canadian reflection of the SDGs, and it outlines 13 ambitious environmental goals, 25 targets, and 48 indicators. And on this slide, you'll see how the SDGs and the Federal Sustainable Development Strategy, or FSDS for short, complement one another and align at the goal and target level. Specifically, we're showing on the slide the SDG 13, how it aligns with our strategy goal on effective action on climate change and low carbon government, and how the SDG 3 aligns with the FSDL's goal of safe and healthy community. In total, the 2016-19 strategy aligns with 12 of the 17 SDGs. So in addition to the goal on this slide, the strategy aligns with SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, SDG 14, life below water, and SDG 15, life on land. So as the strategy focuses on environment, the fact that it covers so many different SDGs overall really shows that they are interconnected and one cannot go without another. So next slide, please. At Environment and Climate Change Canada, we have taken measures to include to incorporate the SDG in the federal development strategy. We're doing it at the goal level, at the target level, and at the indicator level. So the slides provide an example of how we have integrated the SDG and how they have influenced the targets that we're showing in our strategy. For example, drinking water. Although drinking water in Canada is among the safest and the cleanest in the world, the access to safe drinking water remained a real challenge for the First Nation communities on reserve. So in light of leaving no one behind and ensuring that all Canadians have clean water to drink, it's really one of our priorities. And as such, our goal on clean drinking water focuses on ensuring that clean drinking water is available everywhere, including on reserve. Our results indicate that as of November 30th, 2017, there were 68 long-term drinking water advisories affecting the public system, the systems that are financially supported by the Department of Indigenous Service Canada in 45 First Nation communities. So as we begin to think about the next FSDS for 19 to 22, the SDG will continue to play a key role by providing a framework to ensure that Canada continue to advance sustainable development and improve the quality of life of Canadians. So next slide, please. So from your presentation at the beginning, it's encouraging to hear about the work that is being done by companies to help implement and incorporate the SDG into their work, and the desire of survey respondents to engage in partnership with government, nonprofits, and industry to advance the SDGs. We also see province, municipalities, and NGOs incorporating SDGs and principles into their planning. However, we continue to see a lack of awareness around the goals among the Canadian public. Last summer, the Privy Council Office conducted a national survey where they interviewed about 1,000 Canadians. So the survey results they conducted are included in this slide. The survey indicated that most Canadians, 58% of Canadians, are not at all aware of the SDG, though the younger respondents and those with more education tended to report higher levels of awareness. Of the remaining 42% that were aware of the SDG, 73% were unable to name anything about the SDG on the top of their mind. So they couldn't recall any specific SDG that they could name. And as Deirdre mentioned previously, there has been a recent press release that announced that in the coming months, government will reach out to Canadians, including Indigenous people, civil society, the private sector, and other levels of government to develop a national strategy that will catalyze actions on the SDGs across the country. So as our strategy, the federal sustainable development strategy is also built around public consultation and engagement. We hope that we will see the numbers of engagement and the numbers of people who knows about the SDG will increase dramatically in the future. And moving forward with our next strategy, our Sustainability Directorate will continue to play a role in promoting SDG and building partnership around the goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. And this is very important, what you brought forward here. As you say, this morning I was actually speaking at the University of Waterloo, that's launching the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, a lot of universities around Canada as well, in terms of engaging also more of the students. And I suggested that we use TIFF, which is one of the things that where a lot of people will look at to have everybody holding the SDGs and talking about the SDG. Jeffrey Sachs, who was speaking there this morning together with me, he suggested that everybody of you walks up to people on the street, say, do you know SDG 13? And if people can't say it, then name and shame them. I'm not sure that is the right way forward, but definitely there's a lot of work to be done. I also know that the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario is very keen, clearly with the mandate on Ontario to spread the word as well, and I was invited there last week, where she's really taking on to spread the words about the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think we'll see a lot of push in that direction. But yes, we don't have that many years to go as well. And continuing on that, actually we have some more insights. And let me just try to see if I can quickly go through this and then perhaps have a discussion with both the panel but also with all of you about, so where do we go from here? One of the things we're asking about in the survey as well is reporting. And you see the statistics here when respondents were asked how the organizations currently report on the SDGs. I should say that all of you should use the UN Global Compact reporting process, as it is, I would say, the easiest way to report on the Sustainable Development Goals by basing the goals on the UN Global Compact 10 principles. It's called the Principle-Based Approach to SDGs Reporting. And if you haven't heard about it, you want to learn more, I urge you to go to the UN Global Compact website or send an email to Jules. Okay, Jules is smiling. Yes, Jules at globalcompact.ca. And as you say, the UN Global Compact also been working with the Global Reporting Initiative, so GRI, to establish a structured approach to reporting and release the business reporting on the SDGs, which is an analysis of the goals and targets, which aims to provide businesses with a uniform mechanism to report on their contribution to and, importantly enough, the impact on the SDGs in an effective and comparable manner. They also provided suggested actions for each target. So please get in touch with us if you want to learn more about the UN Global Compact, how we can support your reporting on the SDGs. And as I said early on, we will have a SDG reporting training September 6th. It seems as organizations have difficulty understanding how to measure the impact of their actions on the SDGs. So today there has not been a consistent standard and medium for business reporting on the SDGs. And again, if you need support on this, then on September 6th, please join us. This morning at the Waterloo University, Stats Canada was actually also speaking about all of their work, and clearly together with Natalie, you and Deidre in terms of collecting the information. I would love to see that we have the information about also what is it that companies doing, that we can align those as much as possible. But more about that later. Another big issue that we from the Global Compact Network Canada driving is partnerships. And the partnerships and collaborations contribute to organizations' engagement with the SDGs. organizations can solve some of this by themselves, but believe me, if we can scale, if we can work together in partnerships, we can scale this and get to the right place sooner rather than later. So we asked about the extent to which organizations collaborate with the government of Canada, with the provincial governments, with not-for-profits, with NGOs, industry associations, as well as also with the Global Compact Network Canada. And what has remained relatively consistent is the desire of the respondents to engage in partnerships with government, with not-for-profits, with industry. And this indicates an opportunity for more cross-sectoral collaboration to further the SDGs, and of course an opportunity for us, Global Compact Network Canada, to reach out to more stakeholders and for you to reach out to us. And perhaps just an example, the SDG Awards 2017, we had Global Affairs Canada together with Tech Resources and Nutrien International to launch their renewed partnership around what's called SAC 2.0. And this year, in terms of the SDG Awards, we are actually asking for those partnerships. And so please, please, please show others what you're doing, both within your own organization, but also in partnerships with others. So the other thing, perhaps, just to say that it's of course encouraging to see that there is this openness and appetite for more of such partnerships. And what we do from Global Compact Network Canada is that we aim to support the Canadian businesses to establish those collaborative partnerships which leverage the strengths of, well, everybody. It's a win-win-win. And we, by doing that together, can tackle the most pressing issues of our time. So we will actually, as you know, engage with several of the federal and provincial ministries and ministers with the aim of facilitating dialogue between the government and the Canadian private sector and not-for-profit and universities, etc., all of those part of the network, and hopefully establish great partnerships for even greater impact. The other thing that came from this survey was, what are the drivers? What are the challenges? And in order to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals, it seems important to understand these key drivers that will encourage organizations to take more action, I should say. And it appears that one of the motivating factors to engage with the Sustainable Development Goals primarily come from outside the organization itself and are driven by market forces. So this is where, perhaps not walk up to a stranger on the street, but walk into your manager, walk into the CEO, and ask, what are we doing in this regard? Could be a help. But also investors starting asking, companies are starting asking in their supply chain, and we are having a lot of work in the moment also in terms of the supply chain. So there's a lot of things going on. Bolstering the broader public awareness of sustainability and the SDGs in the marketplace can help drive this change within organizations. And as many of you know, we have been doing that since we got the SDGs. However, there clearly remain many challenges within organizations, and that serve a barrier to advance the action on the SDGs. And you see some of the challenges on the screen, and the last point is especially significant given the importance of this external marketplace in driving organizations' SDGs behavior. So if you all have this problem, I suggest you all book a Sustainability Spotlight webinar with the Global Compact Network Canada, and we can help you share the great things you're doing with your peers and your customers. There's a lot of things that Jules is doing also in terms of getting what you're doing out to our bigger and bigger network, not only in Canada, but actually globally. So let us know what you're doing. We'll help you communicate that, as long as that can educate customers and sustainability efforts, educate, basically all your stakeholders, and educate also your peers. And by the way, your competitors. Feel free to send that all to us. The next one here is actions and initiatives. And the survey asked respondents about the actions they have taken on the Sustainable Development Goals. There are various levels of action available to companies where considering the SDGs. The most highly engaged company is those that have not only mapped and aligned and embedded its corporate strategies with SDGs, but also both have looked at it as a strategic tool. What are the risks, what are the opportunities that the SDGs can present to the company? And of course, publicly report on the impact of those SDG strategies. Of all the respondents, 13% indicated, and this goes back to your point, Natalie, 13% indicate that they are at this level of engagement. And that's, of course, significant implementation, accountability that comes with that. Another 19.6% of the organizations say that they embed the SDGs into corporate strategies, but do not yet do any impact assessments or engage in reporting. But the largest percentage of the respondents, 33.7%, indicate that while they consider the SDGs, they do not yet formally align with them with the business strategy, with the goals and objectives. Another 11% have not taken any action to contribute toward the SDGs, and 12.7% do not know what the organizations have done, if anything. And bear in mind that this is those that have selected to respond to our survey. So with that, I think we're doing a good job at the Global Compact Network Canada, but we need your help. We need all of your help because there's much more that we need to do to get the message out. So much room for improvement when it comes to implementation and actions to meet the SDGs. And again, I wanted to see if we have both perhaps reactions from the panelists, but also this is the time, I guess, where you can start typing in your questions if you're not already done so. But maybe we already have questions. There we have the slide. But why don't we open it up for perhaps Piedra and Natalie and Dorst first, and then we'll take a few questions when we see the questions start coming in. Can you open up the and can you open up for and what in Natalie, I know that we opened your mic now, so maybe I'd just start with you. So when you hear about these results, and as you said before, all the work that you're doing as well, any reactions comes in mind saying, okay, yes, next year we will have many more that say they're aware of it, or what's your thoughts when you hear all of this?
Well, basically, we continue to work towards just spreading the word and making sure that people are really integrating the SDG. And I'm talking people in general, even at the individual level, that we're thinking about sustainable development in our day-to-day choices. But also, if looking at your last slide, and this was very interesting, thank you very much, you noted a few drivers and challenges to achieving the SDGs. And maybe just to add, from our experience here at Environment and Climate Change Canada, there are other remaining challenges. So there we see some I'm sorry, this is a hard word. Organizational barriers and challenges with working across jurisdictions. So in terms of organizational barrier, so like any large institution where the barriers that we see we need to overcome is to have an understanding through an accurate measurement of our environmental or carbon footprint, having the internal expertise or mechanisms or resources to properly assess the benefits and implement sustainable development strategies, changing corporate culture, so all of those things in relation to mechanisms. Also integrating sustainable development and environmental consideration into decision-making process. So not only looking at the financial, but also looking at our impact, the impact we will have on our environment, the impact we will have on the health of Canadians. And also another organizational barrier that we've seen is having a champion of sustainable development in senior management. Throughout our conversation, what we've noticed in some instances is that the working level was pretty much, yeah? Yes? Hello? You've lost me.
Natalie, you're kind of disappearing, at least for me.
Okay. Well, my line is not muted.
Natalie, I can hear you talking, but I can't really hear you. Natalie?
Yes, that's good.
I lost you.
And the line is getting bad at that point.
Natalie,
at this end as
I'm
well.
going to go to Deidre to see, and then hopefully we can get you back. But hopefully we can get you back. Okay. So let's see if we can just open up for. Where did we have? Can you help me finding Deidre? Too many people. No, there's nothing. Jules is saying too many people. We have to sit and find here. Deidre, we're finding you now. We open up for your mic now. If you and hopefully it's not an Ottawa thing that we losing the connection. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, happy to chime in, and I see there's some questions coming in, so I think it'll be great to take some of the questions that are coming in. I mean, absolutely, exactly. You know, the engagement that you're talking about will be key, the tracking and the reporting. I mean, here at Global Affairs Canada, we're very much focused on the international piece and engaging with Canadians and then internationally to advance the SDGs with all the different partners. It was alluded to earlier, but a really big milestone for Canada will be at the UN this July. Will be our voluntary national review of Canada's approach to the SDGs. So the progress we've made, the plans that we're putting in place. So, you know, our accomplishments to date. Statistics Canada, as well at the federal level, is working with the UN and partners on SDG indicators. So that piece, that critical piece in terms of consistent measuring and ensuring that developing countries and developed countries have the capacity and the frameworks in place. 3 years in, it's still early days. We have some years to go, so we need those foundational pieces in there. And just to underline again that the knowledge, innovation, investment of the private sector will be critical to unlocking the growth potential in developing countries. So SDG 17, which emphasizes multi-stakeholder partnerships to mobilize and share knowledge and technology and financial resources, is a critical one. And maybe I'll just say with a few weeks ahead of the G7 summit in Canada, Canada is highlighting the importance of mobilizing private capital for the Sustainable Development Goals during its presidency. I'll stop there. Thanks. And I assume, are we going to 1:30? But I'm available. I'm flexible.
I think we are. But thank you. First and foremost, thanks for answering. Yes, the webinar is until 1:30, so we also can have questions from everybody. And I should say that, Natalie, I'm getting messages that everybody else apparently could hear you well. So sorry about that. Let's just go to some of the questions, and then Natalie, I'll get you in a little bit later. I'm sorry, everybody, that I cut Natalie short. It's only me that couldn't hear you. So there's a question here from Dorst, and Dorst, it says, I understand the Tahoe is in the process of development of a comprehensive indigenous peoples policy. And then it asks, have you reflected on the relationship or overlap between the SDGs and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? And how has the UNDRIP or UNDRIP informed your understanding of the SDGs and vice versa? And then let's see if I can you are unmuted. So
I think, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. Interesting question. Maybe I'll back up for a moment and actually speak to a point that Dieter was just mentioning, in particular related to the importance of partnerships and something I didn't speak about in my initial comments, but you know, from the private sector being a driver of development and a critical player in the development agenda, particularly abroad, it really cannot happen with the private sector or particular individual companies working as a silo, and you know, we all agree to that, of course, and as companies, of course, we also come up against that each time we try to not necessarily intentionally go it alone, but you know, with all good intention and try to move programs forward. These things must happen in partnership, not only with local communities, but with local governments and the broader development and international assistance sector, so that, for that very reason, so that there is sustainability in everything that moves forward. And in that respect, well, first, in development of our comprehensive Indigenous Peoples policy, we're certainly taking a collaborative approach and a partnership approach in that, with the nonprofit sector supporting us through the process, but also with local governments, particularly Indigenous government institutions, to make sure that that's moving forward in a way that is effective and with a strong basis for having long-term positive outcomes. In that respect, the UNDRIP certainly, or I think the question was, how does the SDGs inform our understanding of the UNDRIP, or vice versa? They are, I mean, it's complementary, right? So as I was saying at the beginning of my remarks, you know, there's a fundamental aspect of fundamental principles of engagement and of collaborative efforts that must underlie any of the work that is done towards any of these SDGs. So certainly I wouldn't, the two are incredibly informative of each other, and I see them as, you know, two pieces of an informed strategy in the development and implementation of a solid Indigenous Peoples program that we're moving forward. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Dorst. And I can see there's a lot of questions also coming in terms of the survey, in terms of the sectors and the results. I urge you to download. There's a whole section about SDG Survey 2018 respondents, who's responded, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe I should not take the time on going into detail on that for now. Let me just see. There is a question here. It says, from this report, it appears that there is a lot of work to be done around awareness building to the private sector. Do you think we should be approaching the private sector for local and global partnerships, or should we be waiting until their awareness is higher? And do we know what the barriers are, why it's taking a while to get them on board? and maybe I should take the first on this one, and then open it up both to you, Doris, but also to Natalie and Deidre. I see that the private sector is actually getting on board. I see that there's a lot of things happening, not only the private sector in Canada, but on a global scale. And it seems as everything else, the first movers start out, they get some good advantages, but when you start seeing that the investors are asking, and many also will know that BlackRock, the world's largest investor, Larry Fink, sent a letter to all the CEOs back in January, just before the Davos meeting, the World Economic Forum meeting, asking for a sense of purpose. And BlackRock, as well as State Street and the other investors looking at the SDGs, we have organizations that are starting to look at to see how can they align what they're doing to the SDGs, etc. We have organizations that are starting to ask their supply chain, what are they doing within the different SDGs. So I do see that there's a lot of the leaders that's out there. My biggest the thing I really would like to see and get all the respondents on this call as well to help with is how do we also engage the SMEs, so the small and medium-sized businesses, not only through a questionnaire from the big companies saying what are you doing, but really to engage, because I think this could be a huge competitive advantage as well for the SMEs. But maybe I should stop talking here and open it up. Perhaps Doris, if you want to start in terms of why engage at all, and how do you get more to engage in the Sustainable Development Goals?
Sure, just really quickly. I mean, well, look, first of all, I'm certainly not going to try to speak for the entire private sector, but I will say, in particular, before joining Tahoe, having spent 12 years in the nonprofit sector advising multinational companies on their responsible business practice, development practice, and particularly conflict-sensitive business practice, I did a lot of engaging of companies on these very topics, and I think it goes back to one of the points I made, which is, you know, the SDGs are a framework to help direct a more unified partnership and collaborative approach to addressing, you know, the most critical needs of our society today. They are not necessarily, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. It's not necessarily that companies haven't been working on addressing the various SDGs. Whether or not that companies are thinking in terms of SDGs, using that framework, or even intentionally mapping to specific SDGs is not necessarily the prime principal indicator on whether they're working on them or not. So I think, in fact, as the SDGs form a framework for really for more effective collaboration, I would suggest it is incredibly useful for other organizations, peer companies or nonprofits or the public sector to engage companies on that very topic that might help them bring them along to aligning or looking at the work that they're already doing within the framework of the SDGs.
Thanks, Doris. Yes, and I think again what we're seeing is that it's going from being, oh, should we do this, to being this competitive advantage. And especially I see from Europe, there's a lot of my the companies I know there that's really using this as a competitive advantage and helping in that way. And perhaps, Natalie, I should unmute you now and hope I can hear you as well as everybody else can hear you. And also thinking about the government and perhaps procurement in that regard, and I don't know if that should be a question to you or to Deidre or to Ministry for Procurement, but how can we also from the government's point of view engage more businesses in aligning this and using this as an opportunity for both doing things better for Canada, but definitely also for the goals as a total, both in Canada and globally. Any things where you're saying from a procurement point of view, regulation, other things that can help to accelerate the uptake of the Sustainable Development Goals in the private sector?
Yes, thanks. A very hard question.
Sorry.
Environment and Climate Change Canada core mandate is not procurement. However, in our federal sustainable development strategy, we do have a goal about greening government operation. That's the first one, and the lead on it is Treasury Board Secretariat. So we're looking at different options to be able to reduce our carbon footprint and improve our sustainability from a federal fleet and federal building. But the federal government also has its greening government policy. And more we're looking at conducting procurement not necessarily only from a lowest bidder point of view, but also high results for Canada in terms of sustainability. Unfortunately, I do not know on top of my head a lot of detail about the greening government policy, but would recommend that you do have a look on our website. All the information is available if you want to have the ins and outs of what the policy is, the procurement policy here is exactly.
Thanks, Natalie. Theodore, do you want to come in here, or should we go to some of the other questions?
I'll quickly chime in a couple of things. I think there's a lot of really good positive momentum, and the response to your survey shows this. So I think, as you say, accelerate that is our objective, and I think we need to think horizontally, not just through traditional silos, but thinking about our civil society partners, academics. I mean, the youth are really enthusiastic about the SDGs, these events at universities like the University of Waterloo. Some of the cities, for example, the mayor of Kitchener, the city of Calgary are doing some really interesting things at the municipal and then also at the provincial level, because of course the SDGs are universal and across, you know, and everybody can play a role. So that's the challenge and the beauty of the SDGs. At the federal level, the SDG unit that was announced in the budget in February is a part of its mandate is going to be that increased coordination and engagement. So that's certainly going to help in programming related to the SDGs in Canada. So again, we're trying to keep that positive momentum and looking for those partnerships as we're going forward and finding areas of common cause, whether it's around gender equality or mobilizing private capital or climate change is you know, gaining those areas of common cause will help us move forward. And maybe it hasn't come up in this conversation yet, but really looking at who, you know, with the moniker "No One Left Behind," I think that's what we have to think about also internationally. We think of the poorest and most vulnerable internationally, but, you know, ensuring we're focused on the most vulnerable in Canada, that being at the heart of the SDGs. Thanks.
Thanks, Deirdre. And I should say, I can see that the policy on green procurement is just being posted on the chat. There's a lot of chat going on here. It's fascinating. A few things. One, a lot of you are asking in terms of reporting. There's a question here from Marcus saying, with dozens of consulting and industry groups recommending different methods and approaches for private sector SDG reporting, what are some of the most recommended methods? Has the best practice for reporting emerged? Is the SDG Compass still recommended? So on that, the United Nations Global Compact, together with Global Reporting Initiative, is working on that reporting framework, and that's what we will be using on the SDG reporting training on September 6th. And yes, I hope that's out by then. Have a little bit of knowledge about what's going on, but that what we'll be using, and that I think will be hopefully the way where we say that is where we're reporting, giving that both the UN Global Compact and the GRI is the world's largest initiative, that also in terms of reporting, that would be embedded in that. Having said that, I led a panel discussion where I also have an IRRC, so integrated reporting, and SASB, as well as CDSB, so the climate standard boards, and all of them are also aligning in terms of the SDGs and actually aligning into that. So my hope is that we are not going to have all of these competing, but actually having this is how we have our scorecard in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. I don't think we have the time to sit and discuss which framework is the best. I think we have the time to actually get to work and action on these. And perhaps then the next question on that, but going to SDG number 5, Emanuela has a question. Is there parallel directorate? How do you say that? I can say this in Danish. Okay, but like that of Natalie, so Environment and Climate Change Canada, that is developing indicators and reporting templates for Canada on SDG number 5. Now we do not have the Minister of Status of Women with us, but Deidre, I know that you clearly also have a huge part in terms of gender equality in the policies. Are you aware of anything in that regard?
I guess, thanks, excellent question. So a couple of things. The new SDG unit will be looking across Canada's federal approach and whole of Canada approach, and that will include which indicators are meaningful for Canada, because the Agenda 2030s, says that each country can implement the SDGs according to their own priorities and approaches, and obviously a national context. So certainly we'll be determining how best to measure SDG 5, which indicators are relevant, which ones we have, what our baseline data. Statistics Canada is going ahead full charge on looking at what data they already have. They have really good numbers. They're developing a portal that should be going live soon. That's going to be reporting on where we do have data. It would be Status of Women Canada would have the latest on what indicators in gender equality would be most meaningful at the national level for Canada. But I can say for Global Affairs Canada, we're also looking at the indicators of our results with our international assistance, and the type of indicators, whether it's, for example, related to the number of women parliamentarians in the world, like just really concrete ways to look at our development impact, but as much as possible aligned with the SDG indicators. So we really have baselines and progress that we can measure over the life of Agenda 2030. Thanks.
Thanks, Deidre. There's actually another question for you here. Has Canada been looking at indicators developed by other countries, such as the EU, so all the European Union countries, already for its voluntary national review of the SDGs? I know that some of the European countries, they're separate, but I don't know if EU has as well. But have you been looking at others? Deidre? I'm not sure if we lost you.
Oh, hi, I'm still here.
Okay.
I think I cut myself off. So a couple of questions there. I guess, well, the indicators are set, you know, at the global level. So there's, you know, the 169 targets, and then, you know, the indicator framework set up by the indicator task force. And again, countries can pick their own indicators as well. Those are very much in place. So, but as much as possible, we want to use the global indicators. And our chief statistician for Canada is very enthusiastic and a compelling speaker with respect to the indicators. With voluntary national review, absolutely. I mean, many countries have, during the first 2 rounds of these reviews each July at the UN, have put forward their approach, how they're going at the SDGs. So we're looking very carefully at all the different countries, not just European countries, Latin America, you know, Colombia, Mexico, African countries, Asian countries, in terms of what they're reporting on, how they're doing it, the governance. So all countries are learning. We're also trying to make sure the international organizations are well placed to support countries in implementing and monitoring the SDGs. So, you know, when we're looking at UN reform, for example, making sure that it's consistent with the SDGs, that in the way that they're integrated, and, you know, the indicators are meant to be indicators. The goals are where we want to get to, and the indicators are ways of measuring that. So there are networks of statisticians that are meeting in the UN task force looking at these indicators to make sure they're measurable, that the data exists. So Canada's really been active in that group. Thanks.
Thank you again. Just looking at the clock, we are almost up on the hour. There's a lot of good activity here, and I love the fact that I think it was Michael saying, I'm going to share this wide and to everybody, and I remind people that everyone has something to contribute to make the world a better place. Michael, thank you, and I hope that you'll all start doing that. I will just, so you can see this, the SDG survey report here, you can download that. I'm just going to remind you that if you want to have these partnerships and establish, and there's also a question about how can NGOs, how can civil society get involved, please, please come. I mean, I know I keep saying the companies, but if you look at all the logos that's part of the Global Compact Network Canada, we do have a lot of not-for-profit, a lot of universities, etc. That's also part of it. So come, help, join. This is an effort we all need to take forward. As I said, on September 7th, please mark your calendar for the Canadian SDG Business Forum. Everybody's welcome, including youth that I already invited. But also on September 6th, we are going to have the training on reporting, as well as the SDG awards being given out. Then Jules asked me to very quickly go through a few slides here. The other thing, the SDG Leadership Awards, put your organization forward, join the SDG Awards 2018. This is your opportunity to get recognized for all the great work that you're doing, but also share that out to everybody. One more, Jules. I should thank my panel before they leave me here. But here are some of the previous award winners and nominees, and then we have all the dates. Well, I'm sure we will share all of this, right? And the sustainability reporting peer review program that also starting very soon, July. And you have some important dates on that one as well. See, we have all this here. And last but not least, and this is the important one I wanted to get to, please stay connected with us, both on Twitter, join our email or emailing list, join on LinkedIn, join the Global Compact Network Canada, and help us spread the word, but not only spreading the word, actually taking action. And with that, I think I am right on the hour. Thank you so much to this incredible panel. Thank you to all you incredible people on this call. We have a few years to go to make the Sustainable Development Goals actually happening. So let's go and get to some action. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Take care.